Most people don't notice the moment it begins. There is no clear starting point, no warning, no dramatic shift that tells you something important has just changed. It feels like a normal day, a normal decision, a normal action. You wake up, go through your routine, make choices the same way you always have. You work, you earn, you spend. Everything feels familiar, predictable, under control. And that's exactly why this system works so well, because it doesn't interrupt your life. It blends into it. At the same time, something else is happening beneath the surface, something you don't see, something you don't feel immediately, something that doesn't demand your attention right away. Every time you choose convenience over patience, every time you remove the need to wait, every time you make a decision based not on what you currently have, but on what you expect to have in the future, a small shift occurs. It doesn't stop you. It doesn't block you. It doesn't create resistance. It allows you to move forward exactly as you intended. But now there is weight attached to that movement.
At first, that weight is almost invisible. It doesn't slow you down in any noticeable way. You don't feel restricted. You don't feel pressure. You continue moving, continue making decisions, continue living your life exactly as before. But each of those small decisions leaves something behind. Or more accurately, it attaches something to you. And over time, those small attachments begin to accumulate. It always starts with something simple, a moment that feels completely harmless. You're holding your card, reaching toward a payment terminal. There's no hesitation, no real barrier between you and what you want. The process is smooth, almost effortless. That's what makes it so effective. It removes friction. It removes delay. It removes the need to think twice. You don't have to pause. You don't have to calculate. You don't have to ask yourself whether this is the right decision in a broader context. You just act. At first, that weight is almost invisible. It doesn't slow you down in any noticeable way. You don't feel restricted. You don't feel pressure. You continue moving, continue making decisions, continue living your life exactly as before. But each of those small decisions leaves something behind. Or more accurately, it attaches something to you. And over time, those small attachments begin to accumulate. It always starts with something simple, a moment that feels completely harmless. You're holding your card, reaching toward a payment terminal. There's no hesitation, no real barrier between you and what you want. The process is smooth, almost effortless. That's what makes it so effective. It removes friction. It removes delay. It removes the need to think twice. You don't have to pause. You don't have to calculate. You don't have to ask yourself whether this is the right decision in a broader context. You just act.
And in that moment, it feels like control. It feels like freedom. It feels like you're making your life easier. But what's actually happening is very different from what you experience emotionally. Because that action is not just a transaction, it's a commitment. You're taking something from the present and attaching it to your future. You're deciding that a future version of yourself will deal with the consequences of what feels easy right now. You walk through a store, you try things on, you look at yourself in the mirror. Everything feels normal. You're not doing anything unusual. You're participating in everyday life. You see something that fits your needs, your style, your current situation. The decision feels justified. And that's the key. Most decisions that lead to long-term financial pressure don't feel reckless. They feel reasonable. But the real decision is not about the item. It's about the method. Because when you choose credit, you disconnect your decision from your current reality. You are no longer limited by what you actually have. You are operating based on what you expect to have later, and that creates a gap between action and consequence.
If you could step back and see your financial life not as separate moments, but as a system, the picture would look very different. Your income comes in as a single stream, clear, simple, whole. But it doesn't stay that way. It immediately splits. A portion goes to current spending, another portion goes to existing obligations, another portion disappears into interest, and what's left is no longer the full amount you thought you had. This doesn't happen randomly. It happens automatically. The system you've built through previous decisions continues operating in the background. It doesn't wait for your permission. It doesn't ask for confirmation. It simply moves. You leave the store, you go home, you continue your day. Nothing dramatic happens. There's no visible consequence. And that's what makes it so easy to repeat, because the result is delayed. The discomfort doesn't appear immediately. The cost is spread out over time. Then comes the first signal, a bill, a notification, a number that represents what you owe. It doesn't look threatening. It looks manageable. And that's intentional, because if it felt overwhelming immediately, you would resist. But instead, it feels acceptable, something you can handle. So you respond in the most comfortable way possible. You don't ignore it. You don't panic. You choose the middle option, the minimum payment. It feels responsible. It feels like you're taking action. It feels like you're staying in control.
But this is where the structure reveals itself. Minimum payments are not designed to eliminate your debt. They are designed to maintain it. Most of what you pay goes towards interest, not toward reducing the actual amount you owe, which means that even though you are making payments, your position is barely changing. Time continues to move. Days pass, weeks pass, months pass. Your life evolves. New situations arise, new needs appear, and because the system is already in place, you continue using it, not because you want to create more pressure, but because it feels like the easiest solution in the moment. This is how repetition turns into structure, not through one large decision, but through many small ones, each one justified, each one manageable, each one seemingly insignificant. But together they form a pattern, and that pattern becomes a system. Now you are no longer dealing with a single obligation. You are managing multiple ones, each one small enough to ignore on its own, but together they begin to create a different experience. Not panic, but pressure. Not crisis, but limitation. You go to work. You invest your time, your focus, your energy. You earn money. And in that moment, everything feels productive. You're doing what you're supposed to do. You're building something. You're moving forward.
But the outcome doesn't fully belong to you anymore, because part of what you earn is already allocated, already assigned to past decisions. Your income arrives, and for a brief moment, it feels like a reset, like a fresh start. But that feeling disappears quickly, because the money begins to move almost immediately. Payments are due, obligations are waiting, and before you make a conscious choice about what to do with your money, a portion of it is already gone. If you could visualize this process clearly, it would look like a system of flows. Money entering your life and immediately splitting into different directions. Some of it stays, but a significant part leaves before you even engage with it intentionally. And that's when the question appears, where did it all go? You worked, you earned, you followed the expected path, and yet the result feels smaller than it should be. That's where frustration begins, not because you failed, but because the system is not visible until you step back and look at it as a whole. When you do that, everything changes, because now you're no longer looking at isolated events. You're looking at structure. You begin to see how everything connects, how one decision leads to another, how patterns form, how systems operate. And that clarity creates a shift. You move from reacting to understanding, from feeling overwhelmed to seeing direction. You begin to separate what matters from what doesn't. You identify what is costing you the most. You start to reorganize. This is where control begins, not with a dramatic action, but with a clear perspective. You create a plan, not a complicated one, not something overwhelming, just simple, structured steps. You focus, you prioritize, you act intentionally. Your first decision feels different, because it is different. You are no longer reacting to pressure. You are choosing direction. Then you take it further. You add something extra, not a large amount, but more than required. And that small difference creates a powerful effect, because that extra amount goes directly toward your actual debt. It reduces the core of the problem, not just the surface. For the first time, you see real movement, not just activity, but progress. And that changes how you feel, because progress creates motivation, and motivation creates consistency. You begin making different decisions in everyday situations. You pause before acting. You think before committing. You ask yourself whether something is worth delaying your progress. And sometimes you choose differently. You remove unnecessary expenses. You simplify your system. You reduce the number of directions your money flows into. And as a result, something important happens. Your money starts staying with you. Instead of disappearing automatically, it remains available. It becomes something you can direct, something you can control, something you can use intentionally. Your system becomes lighter, more efficient, more predictable. The pressure begins to decrease. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily. You are no longer reacting. You are operating.
Eventually, you reach a point where the system that once controlled you is no longer dominant. It is shrinking, weakening, losing its hold. You approach the final stage, the last payment. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't need to, because the real change has already happened before this moment. This is just the final step in a process you've been building. You make the payment, and then it's over. No continuation, no remaining balance, no hidden extension, just zero. And what replaces it is not just financial relief. It's something deeper. Mental clarity. Space.
Calm. Because the background pressure that was always there is now gone. Your money is no longer divided by past decisions. It belongs to you fully. And that changes everything. Now, when money comes in, it stays. It accumulates. It grows. You begin saving, and this time it doesn't disappear. It builds. You begin thinking differently, not about survival, but about growth. Not about managing pressure, but about creating stability. Your life becomes simpler, more structured, more intentional. You move forward without resistance. You make decisions with clarity. You see your future more clearly. And most importantly, you are no longer controlled by your past. You are building what comes next.
And that is the real transformation. Not just being free from debt, but being in control of your direction. Because in the end, financial freedom is not about how much you have. It's about who decides where it goes.